Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive. We're back here with another edition of Budget Magic. This week we're heading back into Modern after spending 3 weeks in a row playing some sweet standard deck that came about from Magic Origins. But it's time to show some love for our non-rotating format of choice here on Budget Magic and delve into Modern once again. Anyway, we are playing Mono White Emeria Control, or Mono White Blank Control. I don't know exactly what you want to call it, that's what I'm calling it. Pretty good price, $42 online, $93 in paper. So for the Modern format, which is pretty expensive, you're getting a really good deal. And I've had a ton of success with this deck. So far, I played 7 matches in the 2-man queues, and I am currently 6-1. So the deck is kind of killing it. Very happy with it. Anyway, let's talk about the cards. Namesake card, Emeria the Sky Ruin. It's a land originally printed in Zendikar. Enters the battlefield tapped. And at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 7 or more planes, you get to return target creature from your graveyard to the battlefield. So you get to reanimate something for free every turn once you have at least 7 planes on the battlefield. Also taps to add 1 white mana, of course. So the idea of this deck is kind of to stall out and to use our creatures and other spells to get to the point where we have Emeria, or even a couple Emerias, and 7 planes, and then we get this overwhelming advantage of just bringing back creatures every turn from the graveyard, and we grind out our opponent pretty quickly once we get to that point. So let's talk about the creatures. The 2-drops. We have 4 copies of Squadron Hawk, the Caw from Cawblade in Standard. It's a 1/1 flyer for 1 and a white. When it enters the battlefield, you can search for up to 3 more copies of Squadron Hawk and put them in your hand. So this is just a good chump blocker. It does generate card advantage, as it pulls those extra copies out of your library. And it works well with our plan of stalling out the game. One thing to note with this is we also have 2 copies of Mistville Plains. Mistville Plains is actually a Plains, that's just not the name of it. Its type is Plains, so it counts towards Emeria, which is one of the requirements. And it has this ability where as long as you control at least 2 white permanents, which we almost always do because our whole deck is full of white permanents, you can pay 1 white, tap it, and put a card from your graveyard on the bottom of your library. So with Squadron Hawk, say you have 1 on the battlefield, when you cast that one, you would search and put another 1 in your hand. So you got 1 on the battlefield, 1 in your hand. You can chump with the Squadron Hawk that's on the battlefield. It goes to the graveyard. Then as long as you have those 2 white permanents, which again isn't usually a problem, you can put that one on the bottom of your graveyard. And when you cast the one that's in your hand, you can search for that one, and it just creates this infinite cycle of chump blockers. You always are generating this card advantage. So that's one of the cool tricks of Squadron Hawk, and one of the reasons it's in the deck. Our next 2-drop is Lone Missionary. Don't laugh. I know you probably wouldn't even play this card in Limited most of the time. It's a 2/1 for 1 and a white. When it enters the battlefield, you gain 4 life. This is another part of our stalling out the game plan. And as a 2/1, it does trade with a lot of creatures early in the game. And the life gain just helps us make sure we can get to the late game, which is where we take over. Our final 2-drop, we have 4 copies of Wall of Omens, a 0/4 wall, so it's a great blocker for 1 and a white. And when it enters the battlefield, you draw a card. So if you notice, the trend about these 2-drops is all of these 2-drops have enter the battlefield abilities. 1 draws a card, Lone Missionary gains life, and Squadron Hawk searches for more Squadron Hawks, which is basically drawing a card. This is because our 3-drop, our main 3-drop, maybe the most important card in the deck, is Flicker Wisp. Flicker Wisp is super awesome. You get a 3/1 flyer for 1 and 2 white, and when it enters the battlefield, you get to exile a target permanent, and you return it to the battlefield under its owner's control at the next end step. We can use this to blink a Lone Missionary and gain more life, to blink a Wall of Omens and draw another card, and we can also use it to get rid of, like against Merfolk, one of the ways they win is by enchanting your land with a Seize Claim or with a Spreading Seas and making it an island, and giving all their guys unblockable since they have Island Walk. Well, Flicker Wisp can just blink that land, get rid of the enchantment, so it just deals with so many different problems. It's a very strong card and very good in this deck. Our next 3-drop, we have 4 copies of Pilgrim's Eye. It's an artifact, 1/1 flyer for 3 mana. When it enters the battlefield, you get to search for a basic land, put it in your hand, and shuffle your library. So Pilgrim's Eye is our main way of getting up to those 7 lands that we need to activate Emeria. And just like Lone Missionary and Squadron Hawk and all our other cards, it's a very good target to bounce with Flicker Wisps. We get another basic out of it every time we bounce it. Our final 3-drop is Blade Splicer. Blade Splicer is from New Phyrexia. For 2 and a white, you get a 1/1. Not that exciting, but it comes along with a 3/3 colorless Golem artifact creature token, and it gives all golems first strike. So you get the 1/1, plus you also get a 3/3 first striker. So that is the basis of the deck. And the other card we were really working up towards is Sun Titan. As you can see, all of our other creatures cost 2 or 3 mana, which means all of our creatures can be targeted by Sun Titan's ability. That's why you have the full 4 copies of Sun Titan. So when it enters the battlefield, you get a 6/6 with Vigilance, and you also get to return a permanent with the converted mana cost or 3 or less from your battlefield to the graveyard. So this allows us to chump with our Flicker Wisps and Pilgrim's Eyes and Blade Splicers, and then get them back. One of the sweetest things you can do is you can play the Sun Titan and get back a Flicker Wisp, and when the Flicker Wisp enters the battlefield, you can flicker the Sun Titan, which will come back on your end step, and then you can get back a Lone Missionary, or a Pilgrim's Eye, or a Blade Splicer, and you just get a ton of value from playing 1/6 mana card. So that's our creature base. Our spells, we have 3 copies of Path to Exile. We're kind of a control deck, and we're trying to play the control game. Plus, the other thing about Path that you might not realize all the time is it's another way for us to target our own creature, like a Blade Splicer or a Pilgrim's Eye, and get another planes onto the battlefield to activate Emeria. So I cut 1 down to 3. If we had more budget, I would definitely play 4. But yeah, you can't really go without Path in this deck, I don't think. We have 3 copies of Oblivion Ring. Catch-all removal. Gets rid of basically any non-hexproof creature, or planeswalker, or enchantment or artifact. It just gets rid of anything. We have 2 copies of Day of Judgment. It might seem strange in a deck with 26 creatures, but we really don't mind our creatures dying because our plan is to get them back with Sun Titan and Emeria, so we can afford to play some Wrath's Mane, because our opponent's creatures are presumably going away forever, while ours are only just going away temporarily until we get to Sun Titan or Emeria. We have 1 copy of Dismember, which is kind of in the place of the 4th Path, just because it's cheaper. If you have 4 paths, play 4 paths, you can move the Dismember to the sideboard. And it might seem strange, but we also have Mortipod, which is actually a really key card to the deck. It's a 2-cost artifact, equipment. It has Living Weapon, so it comes into play on attached to a 0/0 Germ token. And a equipped creature gets +0/+1, and you can sacrifice the creature to deal 1 damage to creature or player. So what Mortipod does for us is, for one thing, it takes care of some problematic creatures, like a Dark Confidant on turn 2. Another thing is, for example, it was very good against Merfolk, because you could use it to kind of break the seal on Kira, which really can shut down our pass and O-rings. So we can ping something with Mortipod to get rid of the first spell gets countered trigger from Kira, and then use our actual removal spells to deal with the Lord of Atlantis or something like that. But maybe the most important thing is it is a way for us to sack our stuff. That is a way that we can put this on a Flicker Wisp on turn 5, sack it at the end of turn, hit a creature, even deal 1 damage to our opponent, and then we can get back the Sun Titan, or play the Sun Titan on turn 6, get back the Flicker Wisp, and start that chain we talked about. That's the thing about Sun Titan and Emeria. While they're both very good, they also need creatures in the graveyard to be good, so Mortipod is kind of our way of making sure we have things in the graveyard. As far as the rest of the lands, 13 planes. We have the 4 Emerias, the 2 Mistspell planes, and 4 Ghost Quarters. The sideboard, we have 3 copies of Dismember, just more catch-all removal. We are, like I said, a control deck, and having the main deck copies of Lone Missionary helps negate the life loss, because we have to cast it for 1 in 4 life. We don't have any black mana. Core Firewalker, it's here for the red decks. Unless they have a Leyline of Punishment or something, Core Firewalker can pretty much just beat a red deck on its own. Celestial Flare, the idea is sort of to get rid of like a Geist of St. Traft, or even just bring it in against other decks with 1 big attacking creature. I wanted to play Ghostly Prison in this slot, but Ghostly Prisons are actually kind of expensive, so we got Celestial Flare instead. 2 copies of Disenchant. As long as it's an artifact or enchantment, Disenchant will do it. Stony Silence, this is mostly here for affinity, but it's also pretty good against the Tron decks that are using all their chromatic spheres and chromatic stars to cycle through their deck. It just locks that down. Also shuts down Oblivion Stone, which is kind of nice. Another copy of Oblivion Ring, another copy of Day of Judgment, and one of Devout Lightcaster. I was thinking, since we were playing basically mono planes, that maybe this would be good against Liliana the Veil. Also can hit a Siege Rhino or a Tasigur. I haven't really brought her in much yet, but I think there could be potential in this deck in specific, even though overall the card isn't great just because the mana cost is so restrictive. But anyway, that's the deck. Like I said, I've had a great amount of success with it, and I've had a ton of fun playing it. It's sort of a control deck, but it's not your sit behind counter spells type control deck, so you're basically tapping out every turn. It's kind of a tap out control deck, and it has a pretty unbeatable late game, so I think you'll really enjoy it. Give it a shot. The nice thing about it too is that putting it together really isn't as bad as it looks. There's a lot of cards here that if you have a decent collection from the last few years, you probably already have. Like Wall of Omens, yeah, now it's $8 added to the cost of our deck, but it's been in supplemental products. It's an uncommon. So a lot of these cards, the Path to Exiles even, just were printed as an F&M promo. So hopefully you have a lot of these cards sitting around, which can bring down the cost of the deck quite a bit. There's not any one big thing that you got to spend on. It's just a whole bunch of little things that you hopefully will already maybe have in your collection and be able to put this deck together for really cheap. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the videos. I had a great time making them. I will talk to you guys next week.